Josh is really good at figuring out movie plots and show plots before they ever reveal anything. In fact, sometimes he's 20 minutes in and he knows what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this skill for a while, and it's kind of an interesting skill, but my dad has done this too. And so I'm like, okay, so not to my extent, though. I'm going to say that. He's not as good as me at it because I don't think he's seen as many movies as I have. And so some of that is bringing everyday skill, and some of it's bringing just an innate skill, I believe.
So we're going to explore Josh's mind. And Al, if you're listening to this podcast, the gauntlet has been thrown down that he can do it better than you. So today we're going to talk about that on Curiosity Continuum.
Hey everybody, this is Josh.
And this is Brian.
Welcome to the podcast for Curiosity Continuum.
Curiosity Continuum is an industry-innovating, non-traditional company passionate about growing wisdom in the next generation.
We are the essential bridge between the analog and digital worlds by building collaborative communities that unleash the power of adaptive expertise and innovation needed to thrive in the 21st century.
We combine and mix essential elements needed to empower people to succeed in new ways not possible outside of a creative, thoughtful, diverse community of fellow curious people.
Follow us on your favorite podcast app to receive notifications of new content. If you like what you hear and you want to dive deeper, visit us at curiositycontinuum.com. Thanks for tuning in, and let's start the conversation.
So, Josh, the all-knowing.
No.
Not the all-knowing. But
the all-knowing, the all-seeing, the I am Josh.
It's storming outside, Josh. Is it storming out where you were storming? Just kidding. Folks, so what I wanted really this podcast episode to talk about was some of the toolkit you bring into a situation. And so this is kind of like a crime scene investigation.
Sure.
Right? When people are coming in or they come onto the scene, something has happened. And unless you catch it like in the act, you don't actually know. You don't know what people were feeling or thinking or doing until you start to get the eyewitness accounts and all that kind of stuff. But you have to come with a toolkit to help to kind of interpret or bring knowledge into it. And so this got me thinking about Josh's ability to say, oh yeah, this is totally what's going to happen. I think you did this with The Sixth Sense years ago.
Yeah.
By M. Night. Like, and if you haven't seen that movie, here's a spoiler. It's like
he's dead.
The guy's
dead. Part of that was I actually remember that, and part of that is I saw the clues, and some of the clues in that movie were like the color schemes. I'm not going to ruin it all for everybody, but if you actually watch that movie again with knowledge of what happens when a certain character is on screen, there is different color schemes happening. And so like you can see, oh, there's allusions to this guy is not here. And there are allusions to that this kid is the only one that can see this guy. So when you actually look at that and you're like, oh, yeah, well, duh, you know. Once you know, it's very present.
Yes.
And that's, I think, that's the big part of this conversation, right, Brian? Like, once you know, you know.
Yep, and then you can't unsee it. It's not like some of those magic eye things or like you just see a rabbit or a duck. Like, you can flop, but you kind of need to have that dropped into your mind at first, you know. Movies like that, just in pop culture, this is going to date Josh and I, but they're well understood examples because they've been around. Like, Sixth Sense is one of them.
Right.
Fight Club is another one.
Right.
If you looked at, what was the other? Oh, Book of Eli with Denzel Washington.
I love that. I love that movie, actually. That's a nice,
movie.
quote-unquote, modern movie because it's like 2015. Or 2011, I'm sorry.
It's about a decade old or so.
Yeah.
But well done. I really enjoyed the movie. These type of things, the question I'm going to ask Josh is like, how do you perceive that? Because, like, first of all, kudos to the creative writers, directors, producers, everybody that makes movies happen. Movies and the media are near and dear to my heart. Another topic for another day. But there's a lot of thought put into creating this experience.
There is.
Right? Then there's the interpretation of it. in a way that you're moving it forward. So Josh was going to be aerospace engineer at one point in his life and decided a different choose your own adventure. But I guarantee you that skill set of being able to figure it out comes in. So why would you notice a color scheme when you're first watching the movie? Like, what are you referencing in your mind when that's happening?
Honestly, I don't have a great answer because I think part of this is just like an innate skill that I've developed. And I have gotten to the part where I just do it now. And I'm like, oh, okay. But like for the Sixth Sense, for example, like I remembered, I should say, when it was different. Like there was a different color on screen every time that this kid showed up. So I'm like, oh, after like 2 times, and they showed it like 8 times, 10 times in the movie. It's a lot. So like if you get it right away, you're like, oh yeah. Then you can verify that and you can kind of cross connect it in your mind. You're like, oh yep, this is totally this. You're totally getting on board. And so that's what I do.
So is a recognition of patterns, because we've talked
pattern
about this
recognition.
in games.
Yep.
Okay. So let's hone in on that a little bit. So in a pattern
I know you are. Okay.
When you say patterns, there's like a repetitive thing that can happen. Right? So tell me, like in your growing up, before Sixth Sense, right? Back when you and I first met, what were the patterns that you noticed about people? Because you also read people very well.
Sure.
Right? There's like an EQ that goes on, but part of it is your innate wiring. But part of it is like, how did you know to notice colors? Like, it wasn't like, and you know, to Josh, just to say, like, you're not like the most expressive, like, visual artist on the planet.
No.
It's not really your skill set, but you notice it. So Josh is not like an art major where he knows this. And so, but how do you notice colors? Like, what was the thing that made you notice that? In the pattern recognitions, like what things appeared in your life, you go, oh yeah, I noticed that, and you just kind of maybe even ruminated on.
I mean, I'm gonna pull this back a little farther. Like Brian's alluded, and we've talked about many times that I love video games. I love patterns. I love statistics, and because they are patterns, I love this kind of mathematical progressions. Pretty sure that I'm like somewhere on the spectrum of being somewhere weird with it, because when we're like driving down the road and I hit like bumps, I remember how many bumps there are between certain spots. I get like very obsessive about that. And I think it really is an innate ability of mine just to do that. But it's also the innate ability over years I've learned to tamp it down a little bit because it can get obsessive. So when Brian and I met, I hadn't really learned to curb that yet. And part of that was like just my everyday life. My everyday upbringing was like they didn't really nurture that part of me because I was young and I don't think they really understood how to do it either. And I'm talking about my parents and my family around me. Didn't really know how to coax that out of me, right? And so when I got to school and I started getting into like mathematics, I loved that. Like I totally like jazzed in on that stuff. And even though I wasn't always the best at it, I totally got it. And part of it is I don't know if I wasn't necessarily I knew I wasn't the best at it, but I recognized like 10, 15, 20 steps ahead of a lot of people. And so I was like, maybe I'm thinking about this too big. And so I've learned over years, and this is where the question's coming back. I'm pulling it back, guys. Pulling it back to where Brian was talking about how did you learn that? And I'm like, really, I learned to shrink the scope down to the point to where it was manageable for me and everyone else. So when I said something, oh, yeah. And that's, I think, where I got my skill with movies. Because I'm like, oh, I know where this goes in this plot, in this thing. This is small. Like, I'm not thinking about... It's probably, honestly, now, this is a profound moment, guys, because this is like an epiphany for me at CC. I think this is where I got my love of movies. because it was a 2-hour thing and I couldn't go beyond it. But if I was sitting in the lunchroom watching like two people converse, like I would get like, oh, this person likes this person, and the next 20 years of their life, I was like going out in my mind. But the movie was finite. And so maybe that's where I started like using that to tamp my mind down, because this is like, seriously, Brian, like this is a profound moment for me right now, because I'm thinking of this right now, and I'm like, I'm thinking like, this is why I love movies so much, because I would always think like, okay, 20 years out, 30 years out, these are what these people are going to do. This is what's going to happen. But in the movie, 2 hours over and it's done. And so it's a perfect escape for me and a mental break. And that's what I love about movies. The mental break. And even to this day, like why I love Marvel movies so much, I know exactly what's going to happen, because it's in the comic books and it's in this and it's in that. But you know what? It's over. But yet there's this overarching world for it. So it satisfies both the niches for me, you know?
That's awesome. This is a fun conversation because I'm not talking and I'm listening to my friend.
Yeah, no, I mean, I literally, until you actually brought that up, I never understood that. I mean, this is like truly like a epiphany moment for me.
Well, I'm so happy for you in that. And I'm glad that people are hearing this as it's kind of coming out, because there are things I think that you have taken for granted in terms of you being able to kind of see the end solution before there's even like a beginning on something. And it's a reverse engineering thing for you.
Right.
So sometimes, and you're very good at solving like in the moment situational things, which I've seen over the course of time, especially like when you got rocked by the hurricane. Like you, in the moment, you could figure that stuff out, right?
Yeah.
Like you could problem solve it. But the greater thing, if you kind of expand it out, is that why does this make sense to you is because you had enough of a vision out to then break it down to component pieces to the present. You know?
Yeah.
And a movie is a very understood format, especially like for like commercial movies. Like there's certain like, you know, Act 1, Act 2A, Act 2B, and Act 3, and different things that can kind of
the climax and the denouement and all that. You know, like you, once you understand movies, you get it.
That's good. I don't know where else to leave it here, folks, but that skill set that Josh had with that, he ported it into something like movies, and he's gained a love for it. And that's a skill also, too, that he brings into every arena of his life. And so these idea of like portable toolkits that you bring, right? This is something like, how do I even get there? It's like, well, because I always love to find the pattern in the bigger picture. Well, then he applied it to movies. And so I think the message here is there are very broad skill sets. And I say this in a way where it sounds like, well, what do you mean by that? What I mean is that you have things in you that you apply again and again at that toolkit. And that's what makes your interpretation of it so special. That's what brings like that flavor that nobody else would understand because they're not you. And when you learn to do that, you can bring that skill again and again. You've reinvented yourself a few times over your life, Josh. You've done many different things.
Yeah.
You know, why could you reinvent yourself in those times? Like I think about all the times you like worked with your dad.
Yeah.
We're talking about you again in this podcast.
Yeah.
Like, why did he hire his middle school aged son to run networking cable through the professional and government organizations that he did? What was the difference?
Right. I mean, I could answer that probably now from hindsight a little bit. You know, part of it is he's my dad, but part of it was I had the skill set required, and I worked for cheap, and so I've been making up for it over the years now. But yeah, this is like a great episode to leave this at, because I really think that people got to realize that the skills you use every day that you think are just like, whatever, they can be applied to a lot of different things. And so the challenge in this episode is think about what skill is like your throwaway skill that you just feel like And it might not even be something that you feel. It's just something that you do all the time. What do you think about that? And how can you utilize that to push yourself even farther? That's all I got, Brian.
Well, until next time, this is Brian.
And this is Josh.
For Curiosity Continuum.